So here we are starting the shed build. My parents needed a new storage shed. And yeah, so here I'm just framing out with these 4x4s. They're very straight and square, so I was very happy, surprised even that my joinery was pretty square, but I think the lumber itself was helping a lot with that. This was my first time doing any real serious carpentry or timber framing, if you would call it that. And I'm using only hand tools here because that's what I'm interested in. I was pretty happy with how these two trusses came out lining up. I think total in the frame there was eight mortise and tenon. Everything was mortise and tenon, and then I drove pegs through those. These timbers had a coat of oiled linseed oil, turpentine, and pine tar added to them because I had read a lot about, I think it was some Norwegian churches that were like 1,000 years old or something, and they were all covered in pine tar. I was gonna do this gable roof with the 4x4s. I ended up having some comments and switching to a different, more flat roof, which I'm glad ended up doing in the end because it would have been a lot more difficult with that gable style. My father works in construction. Here I am at one of his job sites. Um, all the framing, 2x4s for the roof frame, and also all the sheathing, so that green plywood, and also the tape I got for free from him, though that is definitely a nice look. Here we are at Home Depot getting the metal roofing material, and also some cladding for these sides. Here's a nifty little thing. So this is called a rebate plane, and Paul Sellers has a great video on how to make one yourself. And so I use this plane to make the little grooves. I think it's called shiplap on these siding panels. Here you can see how they fit together. And the shed is 5x5. So I bought 10-foot lengths of these panels. They're 1x8 material. And that way, instead of buying 8-foot panels and then, wasting 3 feet when you cut it to length, just pound them in with some galvanized nails, and there you go. Here you can see the metal roof. I would have loved to do shingles, but to my understanding, on such a flat roof, you really need modern materials. But that's a project for another day. Here we are back at Home Depot. You might think it would be a lot of trips to Home Depot, but it really wasn't that bad, maybe 4 or 5, so I'm proud of that. I got some birch plywood for the doors and also a few extra little pieces for trim. So now we are building the doors, and I did the traditional frame and panel style, it's called. It's in most cabinets, it's basically you have a solid wood frame and then you have a panel that's just floating in the middle in a groove. So with wood movement, the doors won't warp and get out of place like that. So I used milk paint on this shed because, as you can tell, I'm very interested in the traditional methods. The blue turned out great, but the white on the trim, I did use shellac to block the knots to prevent the staining, but it still came through a little bit. So you live and you learn. Have to try something else next time. Here you can see a little more detail on how the doors are constructed. So one of them has a mortise and tenon wedged. The other one has dovetail, just because I wanted to try different things. But I did have those diagonal braces. If you were probably didn't need them, but I'm definitely an amateur, so felt more comfortable having those. So these door handles are carved out of a big hunk of cherry firewood, and man, they are just pretty, especially when you put a couple coats of boiled linseed oil on them. That was really fun. So here is a final tour. Everything done. I'm for the most part pretty happy with it. Obviously, there's a million things that went wrong and aren't completely perfect, but that's how you learn stuff, right? So I'm pretty happy with it.